stars be with you.
All right, everyone. Welcome back to the Energetic Principles podcast. My name is Melissa LaFara, and today I am joined by Spencer Michaud, who is back on the program after, oh my God, how long has it been? It's been a couple years, Spencer, right?
Yeah, I think so. Like 2023 maybe. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. The years, they just fly. They just fly. So it's been a hot minute since Spencer's been on my program, but if you're on the old YouTubes, you can always find Spencer over at his channel, Spencer Michaud Astrology, because Spencer is very live, very active with the lives. So yes, very live. Yeah. So we are going to be discussing another angle of Saturn Neptune here today in the Saturn Neptune series. And we're going to be taking more of like a personal, because Saturn Neptune is a very collective energy, but with any energy, especially collective ones, we're all going to feel it in our personal lives. So we're going to dive in a little today of like, how does it look like in our lives, especially if we talk about the, being under paradoxical energies or when life asks us to take a risk and what that looks like. And even something that I like that Spencer brought up is, the question of like ethics and what, ethical decisions look like in a rapidly changing world. These are all individual questions we have to ask ourselves because at the end of the day, we're the only ones living our lives, right? So let's get down to the personal aspect. But before we get started here, Spencer, share a little bit about yourself with the listeners.
Yeah. So I have my astrology YouTube channel, Spencer Michaud Astrology. I've been studying astrology for a couple decades now, and transitioned into doing professional astrology in around 2018 or so. And studied with the Nightlight astrology folks and got into traditional Hellenistic astrology and trying to, bridge the gap between that and some of the more modern techniques. I really enjoy using the decans and uh, the associations with the tarot cards and the fixed stars. Um, yeah, it's been quite a journey with astrology and expanding what we're doing. And now there will be a new chapter that we're all going to be experiencing with all of that, right?
Yes, we are new chaptering all over the place, which can be scary
A little bit,
for a
a
lot
little
of
bit.
people. Spencer and I were talking a lot about, the uncertainty component that Saturn and Neptune bring to the table. And I've been meditating a lot on fear and how fear like, I mean, sometimes it's there's absolutely a reason to have fear about something, but then also how does the magical components of fear then, implicate our lives and how we live it and how we manifest. And so, yeah, it's a complex time. And that's, that's one of the things we're going to be talking about here today is actually the paradoxical nature of Saturn and Neptune coming together, right? Because I mean, this is a grand conjunction, and grand conjunctions, if you don't know by now, are essentially those outer planets, typically Jupiter and beyond. We think about Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, at least in our, finite system here. When those planets come together, it's not every day. And when they do, they create these grand conjunctions, which create, a flavor in the collective that start new cycles based on the archetypes of those two planets meeting. Sometimes it's even more than those planets. 2020 had so many grand conjunctions in one year. We were feeling,
It's a lot. Yeah.
it was a lot. It was a lot. And so, I mean, even thinking about 2020 based on like what we're feeling here today and like the difference, if you want to think about just grand conjunction energy and, what we experience and the collective and how it then manifests in our individual life, it could be a good exercise of contemplation.
Yeah, we had those Saturn Jupiter conjunctions. That was that in the first degrees of Aries? Excuse me, Aquarius, right? If
Yes,
I'm not mistaken.
Aquarius. Yeah.
And that was
Yeah.
a way that traditional astrologers would measure different epochs of time. So that was one of the first conjunctions of those two planets in air signs. We had that one in 1981 with Libra, sort of just a little preview. But now for the next couple hundred years, they're going to be happening in those air signs. So that was really an initiating process for a lot of the issues that we're continuing to deal with, and that this is a continuation of.
Yeah, absolutely. And then on top of that, there was Saturn, Pluto
Yeah.
in Capricorn. There was Jupiter, Pluto in Capricorn. And so, as we start to unpack more of Saturn and Neptune coming together, especially at 0 degrees of Aries, knowing that it's essentially in this working sextile with the Jupiter Saturn conjunction that took place, air and fire together, these are the most volatile of compounds.
Yeah.
And they're very outward reaching and they are very fast moving. And versus the Jupiter, Pluto, Saturn, Pluto, and Capricorn, which are, our systems and our structures. And Pluto is like just, eroding all that, the pandemic obviously put a whole stick in the spoke of the world for in business and capitalism in home market, like a lot of people bought homes and now that's all changed. It's just so much. So anyways, we feel this on the collective, but then how does it filter down into our individual reality? Because we can't get away from what's happening to the world.
I think
So yeah,
defining
go ahead.
these planetary energies, just in basic terms, I think will help us engage with it. Right, talking about Saturn structure, the concretization, making something real, sometimes being forced to do so, uh, and then the Neptune energy of dissolving, the Neptune energy of being a solvent energy, of trying to reach for a divine ideal or a utopian type of dream, and how different those two energies are. How um, almost paradoxical they are, right? Although I will say this, in classical mythology, Saturn, Kronos had this longing for golden age type of experience, and that does seem to have some synchronicity with Neptune. Um, Funnily enough, when Neptune was discovered, it was conjoining Saturn, so that may even give us an interesting angle as far as the actual nature of Neptune. The outer planets have always kind of, since they're so new, and there's always this kind of thought in my mind about, well, do we really completely understand the nature of these planets yet? And I think we're still trying to discover exactly what they may mean for us collectively and personally. But I
Hmm.
like what Robert Schmidt said about the outer planets from Project Hindsight. He talks about Neptune being a form of a transcendental moon, and he compares that to the Hermetic concept of the one mind and the one thing. The one mind being in his estimation, Uranian, like consciousness itself, and the one thing being the substance that consciousness infuses into to bring things into form, or in Neptune's case, sometimes to return form back to universal substance. And that
Hmm.
that to me is a really fascinating idea, like the primordial ocean energy, right?
Oh, I love that. Hmm. Yeah, that's well, I love your point about the fact that we're still discovering what this is, and maybe that is an opportunity, with Saturn coming along, when we think about Saturn being the archetype of, what is real and the reality and, like, just, concretization of, what it is that it touches, and so I wonder if especially Aries being such a sign of discovery, like new frontier, new territory. I wonder if this is a valuable learning lesson for our understanding of Neptune. Obviously under the flavor of Aries, but like because I look back in the last 600 years of time, and the only time we've had Saturn conjunct Neptune and Aries was in 1703. So that's there has been an incident, and I want to go further into that. Not here today. I will be discussing it later with Catherine Urban. We're going to be talking about more faith and religion, but there's some interesting correlations there. But um, it's we haven't really experienced that this much in modern age. And when I say modern age, I mean like
Since we're kind of in the middle of our lives, we experienced one, right, with the fall of the Berlin Wall, with the
Oh,
Saturn
yes.
Neptune conjunction in Capricorn. I think that's a perfect example, though, of like structures dissolving, and creating something new. So that to me is fairly instructive as far as what types of things we might be able to expect as far as uh, the desire to create something new, but also the need to dissolve an old order, an old structure to do so.
Yeah. And, I think about Neptune being essentially also a god connected with the wrath of the seas and of storms and of, the things that come and can wash people away. Think about like the disillusion, like the tidal wave comes in, and then anything that's on the shore just gets swept out to sea. Like one minute you're standing with feet firm on the ground, and the next, you're in a rip current and it's taking you under. And that could be the difficult part about, this dissolving energy or this storm bringer of Neptune when we are very, especially as we do this talk right now, both of these planets are at the tail end of Neptune, of Pisces, not quite in Aries yet. So there's even more of this emphasis of being like swept out to sea in some way. And when you're no longer standing on solid ground and you're at the mercy of the current, it's like, how do you that can be, paradoxically speaking, that can be overwhelming, that can be confusing, uncertainty, but it can also lead to what Spencer brought up in our email thread, interesting outcomes of like how to work with this together. So I don't know. What do you think about like maybe shifting this, like the confusion and the uncertainty to this point of like, what could become of this?
I mean, I have a personal experience with it. Like in the last week or so, as we record this, we're going through the grand water trines, moving through Scorpio, and making the trine to Jupiter and Cancer and Saturn and Neptune and Pisces. But the fulcrum of that grand water trine is releasing old forms, all these planets moving through Scorpio. So we're going through this period right now of releasing forms that maybe have outlived their vitality. And this is an interesting way to think about Mars, too, because we're going to talk about Mars as the host of Saturn and Neptune. But what Mars does is it severs and separates. And in Scorpio, what we're experiencing right now, we're severing and separating uh, the spirit from the body to return the form that is spent back to the earth to create the compost for the next cycle. When we get into Aries, that severing is severing the spirit from the collective unconscious, the collective consciousness, whatever it might be, to individuate, to infuse back into a body. So I think that just in context of like timelines, what we're experiencing now is the dissolving process where we're saying there are forms that are leaving our lives. And we have a Venus and Mars cazimi in January that is going to be a positive, an interesting new start, a powerful new start, I guess. And then we have that Saturn Neptune conjunction in late February when we're going to see like a more of a communal new start. But yeah, this week, just on a personal note, like I have a beautiful partner. Her name's Tanya, and she's been a manager of a local farmers market for a number of years, almost a decade. And she got laid off this week, and it's been a big shock, but also the dissolving of an old form, but a potential opportunity. So the challenge with it is, at least from my own experience and my own emotional place, and observing her go through this process. Um, this Saturn Neptune energy in Pisces is very emotional. We're in the third decan of Pisces, where the swings of emotion are wide. The heights of ecstasy, the depths of despair, the uncertainty that comes when the structures of your life start to dissolve. In our case, her job was the stable one. Do you know what I'm saying? Like I'm a professional astrologer. Income comes and goes. It's not the quote unquote normal life slash job. And, that there's a lot of fear and there's a lot of anxiety that comes up when you have those changes that are coming. And as far as what I've observed with her, like the fear of the coming fear of having to maybe make a new start, right? The anxiety that comes with that, but also the opportunity that comes with it. Um, my partner has a magical business called Third Coast Mojo on Etsy, where she sells magically elected oils and materia and things of that nature. And it's been sort of a side hustle for a while. And there are talks about, like, well, should we take the risk of trying to put more energy into that business? One thing I've observed with her, I think this is a really good story for this, because it is this aspect in action on a personal level. Um, she's a maker, right? She's someone who loves to make things. She's very good at making things. She was thrust into a role at one point in her job where she started off that job being a maker, and then they thrust her into an administrative role. And it is one that she wasn't super happy in. So even though this was a shock and like the security parts of it were being dissolved, it might be this nudge from the universe to say this was a role that wasn't suited for you, it wasn't bringing you vitality anymore, and how we're going to take it away. Like, you might not have been able to do that on your own. We're just taking it away. And I think that sometimes planets like Saturn, Neptune, all the planets really nudge us in these directions of embracing our fate, embracing, maybe helping us to dissolve the boundaries between who we really need to become over time. And the fascinating thing to me about it is, uh, she and I are both we're both Taurus moons. We're both kind of like, yeah, we'll just accept things how they come. We're not super aggressive people. You know what I mean? We're not super risk takers. I will say that. And we're not really that competitive either. Like, I was telling you earlier in the show, like, I used to be kind of a more competitive person as a young person, as an athlete and things like that. But as I've gotten older, I've sort of mellowed in that. And I've sort of seen the challenges of competition, and sort of been like, I'm just going to put that over to the side. But what I'm feeling now is that it's almost like we don't have any choice to compete, uh, to take initiative, to be individuals, to start something new. It's like you better figure it out, or you won't have the structures in your life that you're going to need moving forward. And as we go through the whatever it was, the 7 stages of grief, whatever it is, we will eventually get to the acceptance point where, once we've mourned the loss of the old form, because there's good things that came through that job, like just being able to work in a system, like a food system that helps feed people, was something that my partner had a lot of positive identity with, and she had a lot of people that she cared about there. And it was a budget cut. Like, we talked a little bit about this too, but a lot of the work that she does with marketing and with um, creative things, those skills are being subsumed by artificial intelligence. And she has witnessed over the last year or so, the people that relied on her to do editing of newsletters, editing of emails, are starting to use AI, and said, well, maybe this is where we can save some money if we cut this person and their job. And we're seeing this all over the country right now. We had 1,400 people let go from Amazon. There was all sorts of job cuts that have been happening in regards to this. But how do we adjust to that? What I think that, even if we go even deeper with this, what does it even mean to be human when we're facing this new, like, seismic shift of technology that can change things so quickly? What does it mean to be an individual? What does it mean to express ourselves? Uh, these are questions a lot of people are asking themselves, because their identities can dissolve in an instant. Like, her identity was very much wrapped up in that job. Our identities as writers, our identities as artists, are completely wrapped up in, you and I both know this as musicians. We created a lot of identity around musicianship, but we went through a transition where I don't think we completely left the music behind, but we sort of dissolved and had to create something completely new with that. And we were talking about, you and I both have Saturn Neptune square in our charts. And I don't know about you, but when I was taking the leap to professional astrology, I had a lot of fear around it. I had a lot of sadness too about leaving behind some of the other, you know, ways I identified with my creativity. Now, I've found a lot of joy doing the work that I do, and I think it's an authentic expression of who I am. But I think that we have to, first of all, not rush the rebirth process. Like, I think that we need to kind of get an internal experience of knowing exactly who we are and what we believe in before we try to make structure out of it.
100% to that. Because, Aries energy, we've already got a taste of it, and Mars right now cruising in Sagittarius, which is getting ready to seed in this new moon that is essentially a stellium in, Scorpio, forming this grand water trine, but it's all, essentially ruled by that, well, chains of Mars there, but Mars in Sagittarius, and so there can be this rush of, what do I do next? Or what does the journey look like? Or like, let me just pivot. I mean, that was a big thing for me in my musical transition from music to moving my energy to my astrology practice was that I was actually, I had a moment when my music, everything I worked for in my music all fell apart at the same time. I happened to be going through a transit where Neptune was on my south node opposing my Saturn. So here we're getting actual transit of, personalized transit of Saturn and Neptune, squaring my Mars. Like no matter what I did, like it was just like a sandcastle. Like the ocean just kept coming in and just, would take a piece of my, like one pillar and then the next pillar and the next pillar. And
I hear you.
so I'm a cardinal person, and cardinal
Yeah.
people need to act. They need to pivot. My cardinal partner is always like, just pivot. Just pivot. You got to pivot. He's always telling me pivot. And I'm like, yes, I know. But sometimes we can also pivot a little too fast. And especially if, like, I like the point that you brought up of the 7 stages of grief. And when you do lose something and life is changing, like pivoting too fast or rushing too forward to the next conclusion or to the next outcome, rather than, as you stated in our pre-talk about like being very present with the process, there is this, I feel like I skipped over my stages of grief, and that actually turned it into a very elongated period of grieving that had a more depressive quality, that had an anger quality. And it like took me, and to be honest, I feel like I'm still unraveling pieces of that. So there's something to be said about not moving too quickly within change or what is lost, especially if there's spiritual work, there's an emotional work to do, uh,
Mhm.
healing work. Yeah,
'Cause
essentially.
a loss can feel like a wound. And when we try to start the next thing too quickly, what we are cheating ourselves out of is the opportunity to shift internal narratives before we engage with the next thing. And when we do that, we're bound to repeat the old process that potentially brought us to the pain point. And this is something I'm having to really work through this week because uh, as our security has sort of fluctuated, I'm like, well, what's next? What are we going to do? Like I want to do something. And what I've had to learn is that we have to go through that grieving process. We have to go through that letting go process first before diving into the action oriented. And it was really a beautiful manifestation of the astrology too, because you know as we're recording this, Mercury and Mars moving through Sagittarius, first decan of Sagittarius, wants to move quickly, but Mercury is about to retrograde. It's about to say, well, you don't want to rush too quickly into this because you don't have all the information yet. You got to ask some of those questions first. And I think this is something that we do in Western civilization is we don't honor the death process like we should. We don't honor the letting go process. We just want to move into the next growth phase. And if we do come into alignment with the seasons and with nature, we understand that the time period that we're in, the Scorpio season that we're in, it's about honoring the dead. It's about returning things to the earth. You can't. This is sort of my realization in the last couple of weeks was just like we can't force something like a seed to grow faster through like watering it more than it needs or yelling at it to grow faster, right? We also can't rush the composting process. We can't cause those microbes to go faster than they are naturally able to do so. Yes, we can provide the right conditions. We can provide the heat. We can provide, the darkness or whatever, and the place for it to decay. But we have to go through it. We have to face those serpent battles that Scorpio brings up. And I think that's if we're talking about the personal aspect of this, not necessarily rushing to the next thing. And remember, this is what's so interesting about this. Saturn is going to be in its fall in Aries. And what does Saturn reward? Patience. Slow and steady wins the race, right? It gives you your due. If we try to burn out too quickly with that, we're not gonna get the results that we desire, because we are not allowing the process to play out, and we're not creating the firm foundation for it. So the questions of foundations, I think, are really important too. Think about your basement flooding, and how are you going to get that water out of the basement before you start repairing the damage? If you just start patching up a hole before you've drained the basement out, you aren't going to, it's just going to keep decaying. It's just going to keep rotting. It's going to keep molding, or whatever it is. You've got to have that catharsis. That ocean in your basement right now, maybe it's some crying, maybe it's some tears, I mean, that's the phase that we're in now, right? And it just is so real to me. And I know as an astrologer that the process of renewal will come, because I literally can see it in the chart. But that doesn't mean that we don't feel these things so deeply, even as objective observers of the cosmos, right? We have to live through it with the people we are trying to guide. We're not immune to the planets. We're not these like demigods that are like, yeah, yes, here we are, just observing. Here's what you should do, and it's crazy, right? And I think it's instructive, though, going through something like this myself and with her. It just helps me appreciate the symbolism, the archetype, and connect it with a lived experience. And I think that's an extraordinarily valuable exercise, is to be able to connect these types of things, not in just an intellectual way, but in an emotional, practical way. I love keeping a journal. I love writing all the aspects in the margin of my journal every single day. So that I've been doing that for about 15 years now. So I have 15 years of like aspects in the margin of my journal and the exact thought and experience I was going through that day. And that is extremely valuable as an astrologer.
Absolutely. Yes. I did that for quite some time myself, for many years, and then I felt like with all that's always on my plate, I was like, it just became too much. I'm like, yeah. And I wasn't even using the fruit of my data that I was basically collecting, because I had no time to process it. But it is especially, I feel like I still do that with my tarot process, polling every day, and I write that down, and I have an animal journal. But it's like it just helps you like sink it in. But I love what you're saying about the kind of Saturnian reward that comes with patience. Because when I think about, Saturn is known as the keeper of time. And, we can think of Saturn, but especially Saturn combining with Neptune as this, image of divine timing and what that looks like. And like you said earlier, if we try to rush things too quickly, or we don't go through the grief, or we're just not clear essentially on like how the foundation will look, or how our mission is pivoting, because Aries is always on a mission, so to speak. Like essentially we're going to be activated in, a Martian style to go and move. But there really is this essence of divine timing at play. And we have to be patient with that. So, but it makes me think too. So, okay, we're talking about this holding period, as we grab our pail and slowly get the water out of the basement here. Which I will say, when you brought up sort of this, like, yeah, we're, as astrologers, we're not just sitting in this objective reality. We all feel it. And that's the hard thing about this time, actually, is that we're in a moment where we have to feel everything. like feeling, and some people are equipped with feelings, others not so much. Like if you're a strong air fire person, it's sitting in the depths of your feeling energy might just not be cool.
You and I are
Or
inundated with it.
yeah, I'm like, we're cancers, we are, we have lived our fair share of emotional experience. But this doesn't mean that we're not succumb by it either, because
No.
it's like, if you're already in the water, and then the current comes and takes you away, it's like, we're just as susceptible. But that's the key part of this particular period, of being able to feel, to emote, to heal, to cleanse, to release. And then essentially that spiritualization component that's happening right now is the divine timing. It is the coming of assertion and direction and possibly risk, because that's what I want to talk about next. That has to have the clarity of connecting with one's soul first before any action can be taken. Like, we can't skip through the soul process,
And an image of water in the basement, I think, is perfect for Saturn Neptune, because Saturn often is thought of ruling things that are under the ground, below the surface, the structures, the foundations of our lives. But yes, think of that water as uh, like hurricane flood, right? Where you have a force that's much greater than you, that is coming and saturating your personal structures. If we're thinking about this in a personal way, we have a flood of collective consciousness coming with Neptune moving into Aries with a new uh, type of projection, I guess you could say, a collective projection, a collective dream, maybe even a collective illusion. We could use all those words with it. A collective spiritualization, a collective desire for um, dissolving into oneness. Um, but think about that ocean wave just coming and just blasting you, like blasting your home or your structures. And then how do you recover from that? Those I think those are the personal questions. Is there are certain things that are out of our control as individuals, and how do we surrender to some of that while also maintaining the personal boundaries that we need to? I think that's one of the questions that's coming up in my mind, is how do we uh, get our like paddle boards or whatever and start riding these waves, and create the levee or the sandbag wall to keep some of those floods out, so that we're not just cast about by whatever ocean wave of the collective emotion. Like, really, because I think Neptune could see it as a collective emotional experience, so that we're not just buffeted around by whatever we see on the news, whatever the zeitgeist is of the moment. That's how we can be strong individuals. I mean, we are a part of it, but yet we will need to be, we will need to have our own values around that too. Because sometimes the collective zeitgeist isn't kind. Sometimes it's not productive. Sometimes it's destructive. And how do we maintain our ethics and personal values in those times? Those are questions I've been thinking a lot about as well.
Yeah, it's so interesting, and that's like the sort of the paradoxical component of both Saturn and especially Neptune being in Aries, which is, essentially the sign of the individual. I wouldn't say individualization happens only in Aries, but when we think about Aries, if we thought about an archetype of sorts, we think about maybe this Martian sort of warrior, or this person that's standing, on the battlefield alone, or like leading the charge kind of thing, and it's got this individualized energy. And it's something I preach all the time on the podcast, of like, our at the end of the day, our influence on the collective is how we show up as individuals. But there is this, ethical component that comes into it all. And, as the world like rapidly changes, it's like, I don't want to use the word right. Maybe I will for, use it loosely. What is the right thing to do for me as Mel, what is the right thing to do for me? And that can look very different from what the right thing to do for Spencer is. And like, and we're all out there seemingly doing the right thing for ourselves. But there is this collective component that comes with it. Is like what we think is the right for us. Is it benefiting, the coming together of individuals and a greater collective unity? Is it benefiting the planet and its survival? Like we were talking about earlier, Spencer and I were talking about like the issues of AI on the environment. And I use AI very very sparingly, but I do use it a little bit. He chides me. He's like, well, a little kid in Georgia doesn't have drinking water, because I, Googled I did an outline for, whatever. But then I'm thinking, I'm like, well, at the end of the day, there's these things like the gas corporations. And if you're driving, or even if you have an electric vehicle, are you buying plastic? Are you buying anything with plastic? Because that could potentially take down, invade our protected areas. Spencer and I are talking about the Alaskan wilderness, and they want to go in and drill in there. And it's like, it's they want to conquest this land, which is very Aries by nature, right? Go into the uncharted territory. Yeah. Neptune, gas, essentially. Saturn, these old structures that are just have a grip on us that really need to fall. But at the end of the day, if we're all out there buying, I hate it. I go to Trader Joe's. I love Trader Joe's, but I'm like, do I really have to buy a zucchini that's wrapped in plastic wrap? Does that need to happen? You know what I mean? Like, and so there's my ethical question. Do I buy that zucchini, or do I like...
Those are excellent questions to ask, because we're talking about how do we make individual choices within the systems that we all share. And do our individual choices like that make a difference? Do they matter? Like, are they able to change the collective belief system? I happen to think that the answer is yes and no. I think
paradox, we're back.
I mean, I think one individual choice it is important to live true to yourself and to your values. At the same time, I think that having discussions about belief in general is equally as important as whether to buy the plastic wrapped zucchini. Like, just you and I having the conversation, the gentle debate about artificial intelligence and what are the ethical repercussions around using that, but also like, why do we feel compelled to use it? Like, we talked about that too. It's yes, we talked about the environmental impact and how it can also potentially dull our process orientated creativity, how it is an intellectual property challenge, but also feeling the need to keep up with the rapidly evolving society that we find ourselves in can make it a very difficult conundrum on some level, as far as figuring out how do we survive within this. And I think Aries is a very survival orientated sign, right? So Mars is like the defender of the life force on some level. It's instinctual. So we may see an increase in people or ourselves within ourselves saying, I just got to do this to survive. This is what I got to do to survive. Like I'm struggling with that right now, because my business model it's been very Neptunian. Like, it's very idealistic. It's very like, I can give a lot of my time and energy away, but it was supported by other structures in my life. In part, my partner's stable job, right? And now that structure has fallen away, can I still be true to those ideals while shifting my own business model, while she shifts her identity and things of that nature? And as we go, my favorite word lately, Mel, is Enshittification. Are you familiar with that concept?
No.
So as we get further and further into late stage capitalism and the gap, the wealth gap between oligarchy and the people, things become more and more enshittified. Like, things that we took for granted, for example, like, I don't know if you use a email list server type of thing. I have a MailChimp as an example. I don't even like
I have
saying the name.
MailChimp. Mm-hmm.
But what MailChimp has been doing, and this is just one example, is they allow you to have features for a certain period of time, and then eventually, once you become completely dependent on them, they take them away unless you pay for them, right? And this is happening in every aspect of our lives. We get dependent on these services, and then eventually they become more and more and more expensive, or they will give you less and less for what you are paying for, right? And I get infuriated with that because not only do we have the enshittification of our services that we use, we have planned obsolescence built into the things that we buy that makes this vicious cycle with all of this, right? We have the technology and ability to make things that last a long period of time. But there's been instances over the course of history, like with light bulbs, for example. We had light bulb technology for many decades before the longer lasting ones that we had now. But a lot of those things get swept under the rug because businesses look at that and say, well, how can I continue to make profit? Yeah, like if this light bulb lasts 10 years instead of 6 months, how are we going to sell more light bulbs, right? And so those questions come into play as far as like, how do we deal with rapidly enshittified services, products, etc., and continue to survive when everything's getting more expensive, when the things that we buy aren't lasting as long? That brings up questions of like, okay, well, where is my line? Like, where is my line as far as what I'm willing to do or not do? And this is an ethical paradox I've really struggled with AI in particular, because we were talking about how it can help with efficiency. It can help with time management, but I've really struggled with what is the cost? What is the cost to our future, to the generations that are to come, to my own neural connections? And I don't know if I have a great answer to it yet. My first answer right now is probably very negative, but I'm leaving space open to say I think that as any tool, there is a possibility that it could be useful for some things. And um, I'm trying to reserve my 100% negative judgment for anyone who uses it, right? Because I understand the pressure that we're under as a society, because society is pushing us to integrate those technologies in response to having to try to meet these challenges of things like planned obsolescence, enshittification, etc. Right? So as we move forward into the Saturn Neptune in Aries conjunction era, here's another little anecdote about this, Mel. Earlier this year, my partner and I decided we wanted to start planting a food forest in our backyard. We were feeling the energy of Saturn of saying self-reliance. You know, we need to grow our own food. We need to be less reliant on this rapidly changing food system. So we bought like a crazy amount of trees, like serviceberry trees, elderberries, uh, pawpaw trees, all these things that are native to our environment. But we did so much that I think the Neptune part of it was there's a little bit of an illusion about how much you could do and how much time and energy and resources you had to carry out this vision. And what happened is we planted about 2/3 of the trees, and then we kind of stalled out. Do you see what I'm saying? We weren't able to. We wanted to build like 5 or 6 raised beds and fill them. We got to a point where we came across some obstacles, other things in life came up, and we kind of stalled out for the season, and we burnt out a little bit. So that is the challenge of how, when you're in the midst of creating structure, and especially towards self-sufficiency, what is possible and what isn't. And the other thing I'll say about that is that not only did we learn that we have limitations, that this is Saturn speaking, we have limitations as far as our Aries self-sufficiency goals, but we couldn't have done what we did without help from our neighbors and without help from our community. And I think that part of it was really eye-opening. It's like, we don't have to be islands. We can be part of a neighborhood community where we are working on our own projects, but we're doing it in conjunction and in service with other people and helping them, borrowing tools rather than buying them, being able to share our abundance with others, being able to help someone like my neighbor. I have a neighbor who um, he was going through a divorce, a big Saturn Neptune challenge. He's 70, so like
Jeez.
so imagine at an advanced age going through a life changing experience like that. We've had a lot of conversations about structure, stability, how to rebuild, and he and I have a really good reciprocal relationship. He has a lot of knowledge about woodworking and tools and things of that nature, and that was something that I had come to more later in life, right? Like I came from a family of like professors, like people that like they were biology, genetics professors, like all these kind of very intellectual, heady people. They didn't have as much of the hand intelligence. And I really, as I've come to get older, I really have learned to respect that as a genius of its own. And that's been kind of the thing, that the relationship that we've had. But it was a connection between myself and my community, realizing that it was an illusion that my partner and I were going to be able to just do this completely by ourselves, like completely separate from the world. And why would we want to do that? Because it's so much more gratifying to do that as a community and as a neighborhood, right?
You know, if you want to go, if you want to go far, go together, right? You know, like kind of thing. It's like, I
Mhm.
think you made a really good point though about the burnout nature of Aries. You know, I always think about with Aries, especially when there's like an Aries moon in the sky. If I were to like give someone advice, I'd be like, pick the low hanging fruit,
Mm.
because you know, like you're only going to be able to pick so much fruit. You're only going to be
Mhm.
able to do so much, because it's like you when you light a match, it flares up and it's like wow, and then all of a sudden you only have so long before it dies down on that stick, kind of thing. You know, that's that vibe there. And maybe that does speak to the the power of, community, or maybe, the Pluto and Aquarius vibe, and how this essentially is going to sextile that. So there is, recognizations, Saturn, of the limits of, individualism and what we can do as, just individual folks. But that doesn't mean that it can't get the party started. It's like,
It's
it's
true.
almost like we need I was joking with Spencer earlier. He's like, I'm a chill person. I'm like, well, nothing about Aries and Saturn and Neptune Aries says chill. It's like, no, you gotta rise up, you gotta initiate, you gotta do. You talked about earlier about this complex relationship with competition, and like being in competition where it's far easier to be maybe for a lot of people it might be easier to be competitive when they're younger. There's more of a vibe, there's more of a Martian vigor to like go out there and get the world, and I'm me and I'm doing my thing, especially if you
Right.
got Leo planets or any fire planets basically. But there's also like a reframe when it comes to competition. It makes me think of like the Five of Wands in the, especially under the more like the Crowley uh, side of things and Thoth Tarot, is that card is it's aligned with strife, but strife is also aligned with striving. And
Right.
so it's this turning point. It's like this being competitive has to be a completely negative thing, or is it just that I'm being competitive in the world by striving for something that is in my survival interest, or my interest of my goals or my ambitions or what I want, because it's like, you had brought up this quality of the world moving too fast, like so fast, and AI is there because it's like, how helpful is AI? It is helpful to some extent, but is the motivation some part of the motivation just so that we can work this capitalistic system even faster, and I mean, you're in a position
Right.
that is like, you know what, I'm not actually in the capitalistic system, I'm giving my energy to others, I like to
Right.
do my thought time, I am lucky enough to have the stability of my partner to where I can give of myself in that Neptunian way. And so I can totally see why you're ability to have like a different perspective on it, because you're not on the hamster wheel, nor do you want to be, and I'm not really on it either. Like I push I push back to it
I
too,
mean,
but there's a lot of people
we're
on that
all
wheel.
in it to a certain degree.
Yes, yes,
I mean, you and I are in it. Let's be real.
I know.
But but we
But not as crazy in it as others.
right, we can choose because of the circumstances that we found ourselves in. We can sometimes choose to make choices that other people may not have the luxury of
Yes.
doing, right? And but what I've learned through this process is that there is always a cost. Like if you think about this in the grand scheme of things, like think about the great, amazing wealth that has been created in the Northern Hemisphere in Western civilization. Well, a lot of that came off of the exploitation of Southern Hemisphere countries. And the wealth that we enjoy came through exploiting people in those southern spaces. And it's the same thing like in my own luxury experience. Like my partner works really hard and like she shouldered a lot of the load for uh, the stability in our life. And at a certain point, we always have conversations about, is this arrangement working, right? We've it's been a conscious one on both of our parts, but at a certain point, there will be a rebalancing of those things, right? Like I'm starting to learn like I don't have to be as completely self-sacrificing if what I'm sacrificing is causing suffering to other people. Like maybe it's not causing suffering to my clients or my students or people that I'm serving, that really I think I love connecting with, and I love being able to give away my time and my knowledge. But if it comes at the expense of my partner and her mental, physical, emotional health, then there has to be a rebalancing of that, right? Because there's always a cost. There's always a cost to these things. And so this is something that I think a lot of us are trying to consider is we may have to, every part of the zodiac is important. Aries is an important part of the initiation process. Competition isn't necessarily bad, but when it becomes extreme, when it becomes exploitative, right? That's when we have to think about where is the balance part of that. But maybe this is just the initiation of a new system. Uh, if we want to go, I'm sorry, I just got a lot of thoughts going in my brain. Um, if you think about Saturn Neptune movements over the course of history and how we can fit into that, a lot of new ideological systemic belief systems, structures like the communist movement, things of that nature were created under the auspices of Saturn Neptune movements. Um, and I'm not saying that that's like the way that we have to go. I'm just saying that it's the ideology, it's the concretization of a dream into something real. And in Aries, we may be having to concretize a commitment to starting a more individualistic path. Um, but again, I go back and forth with it because we don't want to glamorize individualism to the point where we're exploiting other people to do so. We don't want to, man, because you see this, we're seeing this a lot in the news right now. We want to project and demonize and blame, and that can get really destructive really quickly. And any type of idealistic utopian movement, whether it's like the fascist movement or the socialist movement, on opposite ends of a spectrum, can lead to really challenging outcomes. So how do we find the balance between wherever we want to go on our journey that doesn't do harm to others? I think you can be competitive without harming others. I've really thought a lot about this,
Absolutely. Yes,
and
you can totally be.
um, but yes, for those of us who are a little bit more, I don't know if I'm necessarily passive, but as a Taurus moon, and my partner is a Taurus moon, we tend to let things come to us on some level, and but we may have to be bound to say, hey, no, we have to take ourselves into account. Sometimes when the more passive of us start saying, I need to be included in the equation, it doesn't come off necessarily as like either arrogant or aggressive. It's just like healthy boundaries. Do you see what I'm saying? It's just like saying, well, you need to take your own needs into account so that you're not just completely falling on the sword. And an example of this is like I do live streams every Friday on my YouTube channel, right? And it's it brings in client work and things like that, but doing the production for a live show that's like 2 hours every week is a lot of work. You probably know this with your
I know.
podcast. And like I don't have like a Patreon or anything like that. And the very simple math of that is that those hours need to start generating income. And if I can't generate the income doing the astrology, I'm going to have to find something else to generate the income. So I won't be able to do the astrology because of necessity of having to provide for my family and things of that nature. You see what I'm saying with that? So it's not that it's
I
like,
feel that.
it's not that I want to get rich or anything. Like it's that necessity says if we want to continue to keep doing this work, we have to find the means of exchange to take ourselves into consideration, because as individuals, to continue to hangman and fall on the sword for these types of things, it's just not sustainable over time, right? It's not a sustainable business model. And I've been taking a long, hard look in the mirror like about it
Well,
recently.
okay, so pivot. I'm going to pivot. I'm going to pivot
Okay,
on that survival
ahead.
point, because we will be wrapping up here shortly, but I really
Sure.
want to talk about risk, because we haven't talked about risk. And I mean, some of the things that you're bringing up right now is got that question in my mind, because when there is this question of survival, what do I need to do for survival? It usually is because we are in an uncomfortable situation. We're at a beginning of, something fresh and new has to be started. And usually fresh and new is not rolled out on a Venusian red carp, a red carp, red
That's a good
tarp.
image.
Yeah, a red carp,
A red carp.
Yes, it's not rolled out on the Venusian red carp. um,
I'm picturing one of
but
those like those tapestries, with like
yeah,
the
that's
red.
like just a big fish.
Yes.
Yeah, that's funny. So I'm thinking about you and your partner's Taurus moon. It's not that, kind of taking the receiving approach is a bad thing. It's just sometimes the universe asks different qualities of us. And then when it's not what we're innately aligned with, then there's challenge there. But as we get into this new territory and survival is an issue, and say you don't have a job and you had time to process the grief, and you like, what, I've always desired to do this thing, but I've never had the courage or the wanted to take the risk or been in a position where life parted the Red Seas for me and allowed that to happen. you know, I'm wondering, I feel like this is going to be a chance for people to take risks in life based on, just the nature of what's happening. But as Spencer, my other side, Spencer had pointed out, it's like, well, how do you know if taking that risk is like a delusional thing? And it's like, maybe the match will just burn out, and then it was, you know, not yeah. I know I'm a big fan of the vulture energy. Nothing is wasted. Even if you do take a risk and you try, you're going to learn something. But I'm just wondering at this point, is like, how do we know when to have faith and like strike when the iron seems like it's hot? Or if we play it safe because we could be seeing, overestimating our abilities or not seeing things clearly. What do you think?
It's a that is a tough one. Um, I think that we do have to take the risks. I think scale is important. Like
Mm.
so think about how Neptune often brings us into confrontation with limitlessness, right? Whereas Saturn is limits. So how do we balance out the limitless part of our brains or our spirits that wants to expand, that wants to connect, that wants to vision, right? With the practical limitations of Saturn. How do we take things one step at a time? So if we look at Saturn and Aries, what can we glean out of a fallen Saturn? Well, instead of rushing through things, even though we might be feeling pressed to do so, we can slow down. Just because a planet is in a certain sign doesn't mean that we have to be beholden to all of its energies 24/7 or do what it's saying we have to do, right? But let me flip that for a second though. Instead of burning ourselves out, how do we think about binding ourselves to the new start? But how do we sustain the new start over time through small daily actions? Like maybe what Saturn says is not, well, you're going to burn out. It says, well, you have to take the leap. You have to have faith in yourself. You have to have faith in the new start, and then you have to work to make it real. You have to show up every day. You have to work. You have to make the videos. You have to make the tarot cards. You have to meet with the clients. You have to do whatever it is, the work that we or you or your listeners are doing. You have to show up and make it real over time. And I think that is the way to work through that. I think also maybe starting smaller, right? If you have the big vision, what's a small part that you can, like a spark, like a
low hanging fruit.
There you go. Right, exactly. Instead of trying to do it all at once, like, what is the first action that you can take? What is the first step that you can take? How can you let that process unfold over time? Because remember, Saturn gives its rewards over time. It is not a planet that rewards quickly. Sometimes you're not going to see the results of your actions for many, many, many years. And that's where the faith part of Neptune maybe comes in, like, is saying, okay, you got to make this new start. You know that it's not going to happen all at once. How do you maintain your center, your faith in that new process? And then I guess the other thing I'll say, Mel, is having faith in the universe, nature, the divine, God, to provide, to become part of a reciprocal exchange with energy, with people, with your community. Because when we make these new starts, we don't want to make the mistake of hoarding. We don't want to hoard resources. We don't want to hoard power. We don't want to hoard authority. This is the types of things that people might try to hoard during these time periods, is saying, well, I have to win, so everyone else has to lose. And I don't think it has to be that way, right? I think that when we share these things, when we make new starts and allow other people to make their new starts, we do have to consider our own needs, but we also have to consider the needs of others in the collective. That's why Saturn is in its exaltation in Libra, because it takes into account the other perspective. It takes into account the needs of the many to create the fabric of society, to create the blueprint that serves the most amount of people, rather than serving just an individual that wants to consolidate power into an authoritarian type of experience. And we're going to be witnessing people trying to consolidate authoritarian power, and not just in America, but in a lot of different places around the world. And how do we as individuals be the antithesis to that while still making the new starts that Saturn requires of us?
All great questions. So, well, let's start to summarize some of the things that we are saying here, because I feel like to touch a bit back on the risk component is that, like, it's not to take risks, it's not to be fearful of taking a risk, but it's, the good old term, a calculated risk, a measured risk. I love what you're saying about scale. And, especially when Neptune, if we have this delusional quality of, like, it can be on two ends. It can be on, oh, I'm seeing it like this, and it's going to be this. And then we want that get rich quick scheme, or we want it to move too fast, and then we're disappointed and delusional and quit. Or
and we may compromise our integrity to do so.
Or we possibly so as well. Right. Or there is this, sort of like the, I had a thought, but Neptune, it went in and out on the other side. But either way, I love this idea of scale and knowing what is, having a vision, which is very Neptunian, and like a spiritual yearning or, dream of sorts. But yeah, not being delusional about how much can happen so quickly. And not being delusional on it has to look a particular way. Like, I think that's a big part of Aries quality too, is like, Aries just gets in, and you kind of, you start the trail and you don't know what's going to be on it. And it's kind of like Sagittarius, and to some extent, like my partner, Sag rising, do not show him a trailer of a movie. He gets angry. Like, he does not want any, like, don't lay it all out for me. Don't ruin it for me. So no spoiler alert, So that could be it too, is like getting too attached to a particular vision might not be the best thing to do right now. as well. And then that whole fallen Saturn component of, and maybe that is just where the challenge is, because Aries burns hot, it burns quick. It's not necessarily known for its staying power. I mean, it is Mars sign, but it's Mars out of sect there, it's just not. So how
Check
do
in
we
with
have
your
to keep going,
yeah,
kind of thing.
and check in with your Capricorn and Aquarius houses as well, because Saturn's going to be trying to
Yes.
provide resources for both of those topics. So yes, you're going to see movement and impulses in the Aries topic of your chart. So you're a Scorpio rising,
Yes.
right?
Third and fourth, I'll be Saturn
Okay.
and
So Saturn is going to be in the sixth house, conjoining Neptune, and trying to provide resources for your third and fourth house. So this could have an effect. The sixth house work, maybe health, all of those issues could start. Fortune that is sometimes it's malus 2K, like misfortune that comes to you, or hard work that you might not get credit for, but that has a lot of effect on your third house of daily habits, routines, your fourth house of roots, family, home, etc. So making those connections is a fundamental traditional astrology kind of guest host relationship technique. And I think it's super important to look at that in your own chart. Like in my chart, I'm a Leo ascendant. It's in the ninth house of my belief systems, my relationship to uh, crystallized beliefs, and saying I might have to shift some of my beliefs to help out my seventh house partners and my sixth house, like work that I have to do. So what I'm seeing is that I might have to have a belief shift to be able to respond to the call of those other topics, right? So how in our personal lives, how do we respond to the call of Saturn and Neptune, and to honor that transit rather than fear it? How do we honor it and say, how do we respond? How do we become responsible? That's what Saturn asks us to do. Responsibility is just the ability to respond, right?
Well, to take that one step further, be very familiar. Well, I'm sure we're all very familiar with where Saturn is in your chart, because Saturn
Mhm.
is also like your Saturn story plays out there. You think about Spencer being the Leo rising and Saturn sitting there in the second house. And like we
Mhm.
already, you've already painted the story, and then it kind of trickles back into this, making money or,
Yeah.
and I have Saturn in the 11th house of, community and maybe my larger hopes and wishes in life, and concretizing my dreams and networking in order to make that happen. That can all fall there too. And one of the things I wanted to bring up, which I guess is part of our practical takeaways as we have you, kind of piecing out where this lives in your chart. Some of us are going to be more prone to this conjunction, or not prone to it, but activated by it than others. Obviously someone who's in a Saturn perfection year, obviously, get ready. But especially people that are going through either their Saturn return, if you have Saturn in early Aries there, which, that'd be like 1967, 1996, if you're born during those years. But also, people that have it in Libra, if you're born in the tail end of 1980, or maybe early 1981, you're getting an opposition. The Cancer Saturn folks in 1973, 1974 ish. And then Capricorn Saturn folks, like 1988, basically, it was hovering there at the beginning of Capricorn. So if you're born during those years as well, or you're in that, or you have I'm not in a Saturn perfection year, but I'm in a nesting doll of Saturn time lords myself right now,
Yeah. Me
So
too.
I'll probably, yeah, you're feeling it.
I'm a
Yes.
level one Saturn zodiacal releasing period for the next, I don't know, 50 years.
Yeah. Well,
So
anybody that's a day chart, essentially,
yeah.
if you're a day chart and you're 40 to 51,
Mhm.
you're in a Saturn, Fedaria as well. So
Oh yeah. Yeah.
there's
Good
that as
point. That's a good
well.
point.
So
Yeah.
I am feeling the Saturn. So to know how this, works out, play out the story, see how it unveils in your life. I think that at the end of the day, what we're saying here is that there's paradoxical energies. It's very complex. It's not black or white. There's a lot of
Can
gray
be
issue here.
confusing. right?
It can be confusing, and it can also be extreme. We can
Right.
see extremes outside of ourselves. We can see extremes going down in our lives that then cause us to have to pivot and maybe
Mhm.
take some risks, deal with some fear, question our sense of identity and what ethically makes sense for us as we navigate new terrain. All these things are coming up. And then how do we do this while honoring grief and embodying patience and divine timing, and faith? It's like, it's a lot. It's a lot. So, Spencer, let's take a deep breath. Everybody, breathe in and because right now, that's all we can do.
One moment at a time, right?
All right. Well, Spencer, I think we did what we could with this topic here today. You've already shared a little bit about yourself, what you got going on with the listeners, but do you have any programs or teachings coming up or things you want to share? Or where can people find you too?
Yeah. So I guess the first place to look is Spencer Michaud Astrology on YouTube. I do a weekly live stream usually on Friday afternoons, and we have a discussion about the full moons, the astrology of the month, and it's a lively discussion space. So if you want to join me, that's a great place to find me. I'm also at spencermichaud.com. I do readings, I teach classes, I do a Deccan walk each year that I'm in the middle of right now, where we go on a year-long journey discussing the Decans and meeting a couple times a month to talk about that. Also have a Lord of the Rings book club that's going on right now too, so that's kind of fun. So we're reading through Tolkien and just making connections with all of the way that society is unfolding and seeing those archetypal themes within the book and the astrology of it all as well. So yeah, and I would also, if I can, plug my beautiful partner's
Yes.
Etsy account. Like,
Yes.
so yeah, go support her. She could use a confidence boost with that right now. Yeah, she has Third Coast Mojo over on Etsy, and it is a apothecary type shop where she magically elects oils. She has soaps, she has bath salts and things of that nature. Really great stuff. She puts a lot of her energy into it. They're beautifully crafted. All sorts of stuff right now. She's releasing new Venus materia. She's got some Saturn materia and Mars stuff. So if you need any mitigation with that, it's a great place to not only support a local small business and help to launch someone's journey into Saturn Neptune potentially, but it really can bring some magic into your life, and it's really great stuff. I wear it all the time. I'm covered in it right now, so I can just layer it up. It's good stuff. Yeah.
Well, Taurus does love its scent, a good scent, a luxurious soap,
Yeah.
perfumes. Venus loves such things. So definitely go check both Spencer and Tanya out there and help support them through this time of change. Because that's, we're all on our individual journeys, but we're all here to support one another. So speaking of support, we're asking for everybody's support today. And leave in a comment too if we can support you in any way, like let
Reciprocity,
us,
right? Reciprocity.
reciprocity. Let us know what
Yeah.
you're doing. It's not just about what we're doing. It's like,
There's
share.
there's enough to go around. I think that's
Yeah,
something to consider, right?
absolutely. And so, well, right now I've got Tarot of Her, our tarot deck that basically we have 79 beautiful round cards that I created with Sarah Jane Lambert, who's the wonderful artist. We created this deck and this is the second edition and we are kickstarting right now. We just reached our funding goal. But funding goal just means getting the product made. It doesn't mean we make any profit or anything like that. So we need support so that we can keep our product in stock and also sustain ourselves from this, hopefully. So
You're
it's a
buying
lovely
Mel,
offering.
buying Mel the gift of time to keep making this stuff
Yes, because we
too.
want to
You
make
know,
more. And we got
that's right.
this fabulous. I wrote a 208-page guidebook on the tarot and our particular tarot, designed this book, did all the things for it.
Awesome.
And now we have an expansion pack. So there's also that we are getting made. So if you like tarot, if you're a fan of amazing art. I mean, Sarah Jane's art is just anybody that sees the deck always, no matter what scenario I'm in, they're like, oh my God, the art is so beautiful. It's so beautiful. Like the first thing, even if they have no interest in tarot whatsoever, oh, it's so beautiful. What? It'll draw you in. So if you want to support two ladies in a woman-owned business, just doing our thing creatively out there in the world, come on over to Kickstarter. Tarotofher.com will get you there, or at least to the link. But we'll be running the Kickstarter through November 21st at midnight. It ends. And yeah, so come on over and support. And of course, if you want to have a consultation, I am here for that. Spencer is here for that as well. That's what us astrologers do. Yeah, and honestly, I think that's it for now. We have said our piece, so we will let you decompress if you're staying with us here this long. But before you decompress, subscribe, like, comment below. Comment below. Tell us, what's going on with you and Saturn Neptune. Tell us what it is you're selling and need support for. We want to hear it. And if you're listening to this podcast style, leave a review wherever you're listening to it, because that helps be searched in the ranks. So, all right. Well, Spencer, it's always a pleasure talking to you. I can't believe it's actually been that long since I've talked to you, but I'm so glad you were able to join me here today.
It's always a pleasure, Mel. Thank you so much for asking me. Appreciate it.
All right, everyone. Well, you take care out there. Don't rush it. Change is happening, and it's on the horizon, but we still have time to sink into it, get our bearings, run through our emotional selves, and then take the leap responsibly.
Believe in yourself. Believe in yourself.
And believe in yourself. I love that.
But
Believe
also
in yourself.
help each other out.
Yeah.
Help each other believe in themselves too.
There we go. We're just lifting people up. You lift yourself up, you lift other people up.
Great. A rising tide lifts all ships.
All right. Well, we'll leave it on that. All right, everyone. You take care. And as always, may the stars be with you.